Hello, guys. Kia ora, and welcome to the musculoskeletal system. I hope you're getting into the swing of things. So, thank you for being in class, if you was in class, or you're watching this before class. And we're going to be labeling lots of muscles, labeling bones, understanding it in way more complex depth. But just an overview for now. Turn into your books. You'll notice that straight away it comes to the bones, actually. So it's musculoskeletal. Muscles means muscles, skeletal means bones. Okay, right. So in your skeletal system, you can see there's a blue and it's yellowy in color. That's because it's been split into something called your axle and pendicular. Now, each your bone has your skeleton has many functions, as you can see what's up on here now, and those functions are support. Okay, so your body is supporting your skin, isn't it? If you didn't have your skeleton, you'd just be like a blob on the floor. Protection, so your skull protects your brain, your sternum protects your heart, your ribs protects your lungs. So there's protection for vital organs. Movement. So because there are different bones joined together by ligaments and tendons, and then the tendons joins to muscle, it allows movement. Okay, a few things that you may not have known is storage and blood cell formation. So within the bones, there are such things, they storage such things that your bone will store, like minerals, calcium, phosphates, and types of carbonate as well. Okay. Now, when they're storing it, what happens? It is your bone grabbing on to these substances, and it will take certain cells within your bone to break these off the bone and put them into bloodstream. It's a magical way how your body works. Okay, blood cell formation. So that your blood cells, your red blood cells predominantly, your red blood cells carry around the oxygen around your body. Okay, so if you're low on red blood cells, it may mean you're low on oxygen slightly. Okay, now it's up to your long bones and the bone marrow in your long bones to produce these cells. We'll go into a little bit of a depth about that, but nothing too major. Now, most bones have knobbly ends, knobbly bits, and this is so ligaments and tendons can grab on and embed themselves into these attachment sites. Okay, so let's think of a bone marrow. You've cut open a long bone longitudinally. Sorry, I can't talk. And in there, you'll see a bit of a soft substance. Now, that bone marrow contains all the recipe to create and grow a blood stem cell. As that blood stem cell grows, it's up to the nervous system to let the body know what cells the body is in need of. For example, if you're catching an infection and your blood stem cells are growing, your nervous system is going to tell your bone marrow, hey, this person is getting an infection. We need some white blood cells. So it will start to mold itself into the white blood cell group, as you can see on this diagram below. If there's something wrong with your bone marrow and your blood stem cell is not growing efficiently and it's growing deformed, then the rest of these life cells cannot be produced. Okay, this is some types of cancer. All right, well, many forms of cancer this happens to. So you might have heard they blitz with radiation and chemotherapy. They blitz all the bone marrow in your long bones, and then they replace or have a bone marrow transplant, hoping that these blood stem cells can grow perfectly again and effectively and efficient. So these cells then can be produced. So a bit of it interesting to know that your bone marrow is produced in your long bones, and they are what produce the red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets for blood, clotting blood throughout your body. So if someone is going in for a hip operation or has broken their femur, it's quite severe. Not only is it the longest bone in your body and meant to be so-called strongest, we don't want it to interfere or get infected into the bone marrow, because that could cause life-threatening, couldn't it? Okay, I'm talking really fast because I've got lots of things to show you. Now, we do talk a lot about osteoporosis. Now, I haven't gone into the structure of a long bone because we did that in class. And if you go through this PowerPoint again, you'll see it. I'll just skip through it as we go through. So inner structure of a long bone, it's compact and hard on the outside. You could knock it like you're knocking a piece of wood. And then on the inside, it's like got a spongy matrix, as you can see here. Now, it's a spongy matrix filled with dead osteocells, and all through this spongy matrix are many, many, many blood vessels called capillaries. All right. Now, within the spongy matrix, there are certain cells. Osteo means bone. Certain cells that help strengthen the bone, break off those minerals and calcium phosphates to go into the bloodstream, and there's constantly a job to do. Now, when someone's starting to develop osteoporosis, what's happening is these cells are becoming imbalanced. So let me say to you, there's a fantastic little 1 minute video on this, and I hope you get it. The osteocytes are these two. Now, osteoclasts scurry around like little mites all through the spongy area, constantly breaking the minerals of the bone down. As it breaks the bone down, all the minerals are being released into the bloodstream, which was the lights of your calcium, goes into the bloodstream to feed all the other organs and where it needs to go. Now, calcium is very important for muscle contraction. Because it's breaking it down, there needs to be osteoblasts scurrying on behind this osteoclast, building the bone back up, making it strong again. So it's staying nice and dense and strong. Now, someone with osteoporosis, this is one of the reasons why your bones become very brittle. The osteoclasts are doing their job, but there's not enough osteoblasts to build the bone behind it. So therefore, then this spongy area is constantly being broken down so we can get the minerals into the blood, but there's no building blocks behind it. So it becomes fragile. And you can see it's all within the inside of the bone. So for signs and symptoms of osteoporosis are unknown until actually someone's possibly broken a bone or they've done a test in the meantime. So like I say, there's a great little YouTube clips around here. I want you to go to the other PowerPoint and have a look, and it makes you have that understanding. So that's osteoporosis. Okay, going back to bones, all different shapes of bones. We told you about the long bone, and it does all the blood cell formation. It's there for support. It's there for levers of movement. Okay, so there's many functions that each bone has. On this PowerPoint and in class, we went over it, but it's just good to know that there are certain different types of bones, and each type of bone has a different job to do. The one missing out here is called your sesamoid bone, which is in your knee. It's called your sesamoid bone, and it's there just to protect your knee joint. So here you are. I want you to reflect back to this, and you're going to fill out page, I think it's 21, but your pages could be different to mine. All right, so this needs to be filled out. Needs to be filled out for your online tests later on. Okay, so cervical, thoracic, lumbosacral, coccyx. So your vertebral column is made up of little vertebrae bones. Each area, they're numbered off and they have an area. Okay, and then out of each vertebrae, there's a disc, and in between each disc, you will eventually, when we do the central nervous system, there'll be spinal nerves coming out, all right, to your peripheral nervous system. It's good they number it off because if there's damage in any areas, they can locate it. So cervical is just as it leaves the neck. Now, normally if anybody breaks the cervical 1, 2, or 3, they're in a pretty bad way. Okay, because the nerves that come out of 1, 2, and 3 actually tell your lungs to breathe, your heart to beat, your organs to work, okay, because they do all the autonomic nervous system. As it gets lower, then you'll start to research that you get paralyzed in different areas of the body. I think in your case study, someone has a discectomy and a spinal fusion around this area. So they're very large bones. They don't do as much movement as the thoracic does, but you can see you're going to research and find out what do these nerve endings supply. Okay, so split into different areas. Thoracic also, you'll have your rib cage coming off it, which you'll see nice and quickly here. There you go. So this is your thoracic, and you see the ribs coming around, and then they join onto a spongy cartilage, which then joins onto your sternum. And this has got movement. So when you breathe in, the rib cage moves up. When you breathe out, the rib cage moves down and squashes the lungs. And that's because of this flexibility of the cartilages. moving on. You're doing well, guys. You're keeping up. Need to know, I want you to come back and look at this. This is just a structure of a long bone, and here it all is. And you need to write that in your book. You can see all the spongy bone, the end, the bottom, and all the blood vessels in the middle. So I don't want to bore you because we're doing this all in class. Okay, this is fantastic. You need to know this for the likes of arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis as well. So in the skeletal system, there are many different types of joints. Okay, the three main ones that we're going to concentrate on is your immovable joint, fibrous, slightly movable, which is your cartilaginous, and freely movable, which is synovial. Now, your fibrous joints basically is a joint that's joined together and now can't move. So when you're born, your skull is actually separated, and as you grow and develop, your skull joins together, and then eventually it can't move. Cartilaginous is like your ribs. So they do have a little bit of movement so you can breathe in and out and your lungs can expand. Also down in your pelvis when you're giving birth, they can have a slightly movable joint as well. So it moves for a reason. Now the ones that we are going to concentrate are called your synovial joint. These are freely movable and there's many of them. The synovial joint is basically a synovial capsule, so we'll talk about the knee, filled with a beautiful fluid called synovial, which helps like a wax or oily substance that allows your knee to bend and to glide. Now, if you're talking about osteoarthritis, what is happening in these synovial joints, the beautiful smooth cartilage is wearing away. When that's starting to wear away on both sides, the bone starts to grind against the bone. Now, if it starts going through the compact bone, as you can imagine, it becomes spongy. It's intense pain. There will be large amounts of swelling and inflammation, and eventually they would have to have a new knee replacement, wouldn't they? Yep. And that's just all in the synovial joint. So we're going to go through some of those synovial joints. I'm just going to flick through them, but you're going to come back and revisit this. So ball and socket has the biggest range of movement, and that's your hip and your shoulders. Your hinge joints is mainly your knee and a bit of and some of your elbow. Pivot is what that can twist, so your elbow can also twist. So that means that your elbow has two joints. And gliding is when a bone on bone can do lots of movements, but at a very, very small scale. Your condyloid joints are in your knuckles. Again, they have quite a large range of movement, but at a small scale. So I want you to go back and you're going to read about these. You also need to label your skeleton. We did it in class, and you can see you also need to put the movements at each joint, which we have done in class, or you need to do a bit of research on that. It's a need to know. All right, so this screencastify is going to be a bit longer because now we're going on to the muscles. You can see you've got to label some areas of the human body, and you need to do this, and the muscles that are listed there for you, because when you do your online test, you need to know where they are and what they're actually called, the correct terminology. Okay. Right, in your skeletal muscles, we always think of like biceps, abs, quads, and so forth. But you're going to learn now there are three different types of muscle. There's cardiac, which is your heart. You can't control that. That's going to keep going. It's going to constantly contract, hopefully. It's rhythmic, okay? And what happens when it's rhythmic? The top contracts and then the bottoms contract. And we're going to learn more about that when we do the cardiac system. But the cardiac muscle is only found in the heart. Then you've got the smooth muscle. Now, a smooth muscle, again, you can't control this. It's completely involuntary, just like your heart muscle. Now, you find your smooth muscle looks very different to your skeletal muscle and very different to your cardiac muscle. And your smooth muscle is found in all your hollow organs. So your hollow organs are like your layers of your stomach, the layers of your bladder, the layers around all your intestine. Where else? The layers of some of your respiratory pathway as well. Okay, so they're around certain hollow organs, and what they do, they constrict to either move substances and to pass urine, and they also relax to allow the substance to go through, which you'll see all in a bit more. So I'll skip through these. This is for you to read through and understand. Now, this is a skeletal muscle. So if you go to page 26, I hope you filled out some of the words there. You can pause this screencastify anytime you like. Now, this is gets a little bit more complex. So this is the average skeletal muscle. Now, without grossing you out, this is your chicken, this is your beef, this is your KFC, this is what you're eating, all right? And I'm a lover, okay? I'm a lover, not a hater, sorry. But it just puts it into perspective how much protein is in there. So there are certain layers of an average muscle. There's an outer layer called your fascia, which is a thick, strong layer that bundles all the muscle fibers together. All right. Now, muscle fibers all bundle together and they are protected by what we call an epimysium. So this layer that's collecting, and you can see all these like triangle or squares, the whiteness of these areas are called your epimysium, and it's a thick, strong layer that holds what we're going to get to, the muscle fibrils together. When we're within now in the muscle, we could pull one of these out, and this is called your muscle fiber. Well, actually, collectively, all of these together is called a fascicle. One of these dots here is called a muscle fiber. Okay, so a fascicle is there all together, and one alone is your muscle fiber. Now, sorry, I'm a little bit wrong here. I said something wrong. This layer all around the outside is your epimysium. This layer here that's going around is called your perimysium. And when we pull out the muscle fiber, around this muscle fiber, which you can't see here, is known as your endomysium. So these are just myosyns that protect the muscle and collectively keep it all together. If you get a bruise, these dots here are your blood vessels. These burst and the blood vessels seep all within the endomysium and perimysium. And eventually the blood ends up dying and it starts to show a bit of discoloration on your skin, and that's known as your bruise. Now, if you take a muscle fiber to bits and it goes even smaller again, you are going to bring out something called your sarcolemma and sarcoplasm, which protects it, and a nucleus, which controls it. Now, the muscle fiber is small enough. And at the moment, when you break down a muscle fiber, microscopically, you are breaking down it into protein filaments. These protein filaments are called actin and myosin. Okay, it's not on here, but you'll see when we get to it. So it's not really too much a big deal about all these words. It's just to know how it breaks down. And if you've ever pulled that chicken apart and it's all stringy, now you know, because there's layers and wraps all around it. You can have a look at here just to correct. Oh, back here, sorry, I want you to read through this. Right, now this is what you need to know. This is what you need to know. When you do the nervous system, this will make more sense. And if you've been in class, this will really make sense. So I'm hoping that I can recap this so you understand. Now, neurotransmitters, neuro means the nervous system. Transmitters is like transmission. It's talking to each other. Now, to get your muscle to contract, there are many nerve endings that sit in the muscle. And what the nerve endings do, they're waiting for a signal. When they get given a signal to go into your muscle, what happens is at the end of the nerve, what we're going to learn of the axon terminal, at the end of the nerve, it's going to open up and neurotransmitters are going to be released. They're going to cross what we're going to call the synapse, which is a space, and it's going to, these neurotransmitters are going to make their way into the muscle. But they're going to make their way into the myofibrils, which are the smallest part of the muscle. So this is all like under tiny microscopic. Now, ACH is acetylcholine. Acetylcholine has to be present within the neurotransmitters and around, so it can open the door and cause a chemical reaction to release the calcium that is sitting within the muscle area. Okay, so acetylcholine not only opens the gates and the doors for the neurotransmitters to come in, it also sends a message to say, wake up, calcium, we need you. We need you to do a job. Calcium then gets woken up, and what happens is, I should have gone over this a bit before, calcium has to grab on to a block that needs to be removed so actin and myosin can grab on to each other. Okay. Once actin and myosin can grab onto each other, they then pull each other together, and they keep on pulling each other together until they contract, until they've got closer. And that is contraction of a muscle. Now, I hope this is done in class, and we've done role play. There's a great YouTube clip I want you to watch, and put this in your own words into your book. So slide and filament theory, there are neurotransmitters, tiny little chemicals that are released from the end of a nerve. They cross the space, the synapse, to jump into the muscle, deep into the muscle. To jump deep into the muscle, acetylcholine, ACH, assists in all this reaction. Okay, so acetylcholine opens up some channels and tells calcium you need to be released and you need to go and do your job. Calcium goes and removes a block so actin and myosin can grab onto each other. Now, as calcium removes this block, the block has got a name called tropomyosin. The calcium moves the block. Actin opens up his binding sites, waiting for myosin to grab onto him. But myosin needs energy to do this. What happens? Another little energy chemical called ATP jumps onto myosin and says, woohoo, let's go. So myosin now grabs onto actin and they pull together. And that is a start of a contraction. But this has to happen multiple times over and over and over again until that muscle cell is contracted. So I've said it twice there, adding on a little bit more information each time. I hope you watch that YouTube clip and you can ask me any questions. Some more great YouTube clips I really want you to go back and watch. And that's the end.